Steve Maroun from Lanevick, welcome.
Thank you, Peter. And appreciate you guys inviting us onto the show.
No, of course. Over the past few weeks, I've been talking to a lot of people in the development space because one of the most important messages out there that's missed is just how difficult development is becoming. Becoming, not how difficult it's become, but becoming. And today I want to get your insights as a developer coming from a family that's been doing development in Sydney for a while. Paint us a picture from 2021, I think,
Yeah,
as to what that journey was like to date and then what happened.
yeah, it's a great question. I've often speak about it. The world of development prior to COVID and the world of development after COVID are literally two different worlds. And I think what's happened is we've just seen this shift in by demand. We've seen this shift in regulatory compliance. We've seen a shift in construction, and it's really created a world where today we see it as a lot in the media calling it a perfect storm
Hmm.
for developers. In that it today is probably, in my opinion, one of the most difficult times ever to develop. And um, I don't say that for sympathy, but I say that because we're on the ground doing this day in, day out. Our company specialized from acquisition to design to we do our finance in house to construction. And I think what we're seeing today is truly, I think, going to shape the markets coming up. And I think when you look at what the state government is doing, trying to release more land and trying to make things easier and putting pressures on the banks and to lend more, I think they're seeing it, and they've been seeing it coming now. So it definitely is a new world.
So, perfect storm, why? Why is it a perfect
Yeah,
storm? Why aren't we seeing the supply that we've seen in other cycles? Why isn't
yeah,
it coming back?
great question. So normally in development, you have four really main areas of as an industry. So you've got acquisition,
Hmm.
right? You've got design, you've got finance, and you've got construction. Like those are your four pillars, right? Normally, it's only one of those pillars that are sort of struggling at any point in time. Either interest rates go up,
Hmm.
or end sales go down, or there's a change in zoning, or there's a change in, say, a finance product or whatnot. So maybe like a credit crunch or whatever. What we were seeing today is there is pressures on every single one of those pillars. You've seen construction rates go up, what is it, 30, 40%, unprecedented, unprecedented. And just that in itself is enough to drop an industry on its knees. You're talking just a simple duplex that cost, $1 million to build has gone up to 1.4, 1.5. Your margin on just a simple duplex is 20, 25 to 30% max, depending on how good you buy. So just that one thing in itself can wipe a development's profit out. Then you've got finance. You've seen the interest
Yep.
rates that have increased, very well documented.
Yep.
No need to go ahead in that. Then you've got a once in generation regulatory and compliance overhaul of New South Wales construction. You've had a building commissioner that's come in my opinion, was long overdue. But I think the time that it came in, it just coincided with these other pressures that were happening on the market. And pretty much what it's happened is it's just added cost to the process, and that cost just cannot be passed on to the end buyer because you're talking today. I still think we're talking about it outside. The Productivity Commission did a report on a minimal 10 to 15% margin with what it costs to build a box today, with the finance contributions and all that good stuff. You need to be selling as a bare minimum $900 to $1 million. Your two bedroom, say one bathroom. I'm talking just typical stock,
Yep.
right? Different segments and different markets. And so you're not seeing 900 to $1 million in probably, I'd say, 85% of the market.
Yep.
So that's to answer your question why it is a perfect storm, because you're seeing development, like an unprecedented amount of development sites that are underwater. They're just underwater.
I want people that don't work on the construction side to understand this a little bit more.
Yeah,
So I'm going to peel back at one of the 4 points that you mentioned,
yeah,
which was the regulatory change in New South Wales. We all want a better industry. And
most
as you
definitely.
said, the commissioner coming in is good. However, there was a cost and a consequence to that.
Correct.
How big, which areas, and break it down for us as to practically some examples.
Yeah, good, great question. So construction is a big moving beast, right? No 2 days are the same in that it is extremely difficult to absolutely pinpoint to the absolute nth degree how a building looks on a plan and how it comes out on site.
Why?
Because you're talking just to deliver, if you're doing just a simple bathroom renovation,
Yeah.
you're probably dealing with 10 to 15 different trades.
Okay.
That's 10 to 15 different trades that have 10 to 15 different supply channels, that have 10 to 15 different labor channels as well. And you're backing that today we're sitting in this room and we're planning
Yep.
that this renovation is going to come out to this, but but you've got to go through the risks and the uncertainty of potentially supply chains tightening up, which will
Yep.
happen in COVID, potentially labor costs increasing unprecedented, which happened in COVID. So when you're delivering, that's just a bathroom renovation.
Yep.
If you're doing, say, an apartment block of, say, 20, 30, 40 apartments, the amount of tradesmen, the amount of supply chains that you are banking on staying as they are today is in the hundreds. And so that's why it's extremely difficult for you today to say, this is how we're going to build this thing on paper. This is how it's going to be done on site. And almost just saying, if that's not how it gets done on site, then it's the builder's problems and he's the person to blame. And so that's why it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult to be able to pinpoint and to be able to write on paper exactly how it's going to come out.
So because the laws have changed or the scrutiny is increased, does
Yeah.
that mean a lot of industry participants are walking away
So
because
what
it's too hard?
So what's happened is the commission has come in and through their research and insights based off Opal Towers and Mascot Towers, the famous
Yeah.
sort of issues and whatnot, they wanted to increase accountability
Mhm.
on designers and building practitioners.
Gotcha.
So what they were finding was, there was a lot of passing on the blame where the designer, say the structural engineer, was saying, well, no, that's the architect's fault because he didn't show this. And then the architect saying, well, no, that's the builder's fault because he didn't build it like this. And the builder saying, well, no, it's the stormwater engineer's fault because we followed that plan. And so there was a lot of passing on the burden. What the commission inevitably did coming in was, we are going to get rid of this all. If you are designing that plan,
Yeah.
you are going to put your name personally, not your business name, that is your personal name with your personal insurance.
Yeah.
You cannot go and if something goes up in arms and go and close the company or go and sort of be smart, you are personally liable. And we're talking jail.
Yeah.
So what that means is that when you're dealing with that hurt with that barrier, or I guess with that standard,
Yeah.
you're going to be making sure that you're going to be double and triple and 4 times checking what you're doing out there. Now, that is a great thing. That is a very, very good thing because it means the documentation that you're building with on site is much more coordinated. But at the same time, the cost of delivering that,
Mm.
professionals' hours is $400-500 an hour minimum.
Yeah.
Any architect, any engineer, that's 4-5. And if we're talking, you're adding, say, 10, 15, 100, 200 hours to the overall process, that's a cost. And that cost gets passed on to the developer. And then that developer passes on that cost to the end product. And that end product is your everyday mom and dad. So you're getting what you want, but it's going to come at a cost. And so it's great when you look at it theoretically, but in facilitating it and seeing it happening on the ground, coinciding with these finance ones like unprecedented interest rate rises and the design and whatnot. So that's why it's that, back to that point, that perfect storm.
Perfection is expensive, right?
Perfection is expensive, but at the same time, there's different markets that want different things, right? And I've always been a believer in, let the market vote with its money, and so if the market is paying for this particular type of product at this particular standard at this particular time frame, it will vote. Let it do its thing. Let us do its thing rather than sort of coming in and forcing change into a market. So look, I think perfection is expensive, but I think it's more about understanding what these different markets want and giving that to them.
Okay, what kind of projects have you now pivoted to
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur and as a business, and where are you guys seeing opportunities, I
Yeah,
guess, from
great.
the fallout of that?
Yeah, great question. So we've come from the medium to high density space. COVID came. It was one of our last projects that we did in that medium to high density space. And we naturally, as you need to fill up the pipeline, you start doing feasibilities, you start, looking at opportunities. And every feasibility we're doing one after the other, after the other, after the other was getting worse and worse and worse and worse because of these construction rates that were going up, because of these interest rates that were going up. And this was early on. We're talking, 2020, end of 2020. And I'm a big believer in what happens in America is happening here. We're just 6 months behind.
Yeah.
And being an avid reader, of the news cycle and whatnot, we started to see, inflation, 5%, 10%, 15%. And we were like, there is serious, serious pressures on the construction. Medium to high density residential is 60%, 65% of the total development cost in an apartment is construction cost,
Okay.
just raw construction cost. So if you're say selling an apartment for say 700 grand, the construction of that is about 450. That's about 60 to 65%. Whereas when we started looking at land and we started looking at a boutique residential, we started realizing that the construction portion of that total development cost, I'm sure your listeners will know, was 30 to 40%.
Mm.
So the pressures that it had on these high density projects was a lot more than it was having on land. Land was only like 15 to 20%. And these boutique residential owner occupier market coincided with the fact that the investor market evaporated, and a lot of these products are picked up by investors looking for a yield. It pretty much left a market of owner occupiers that were in the market looking to buy. So we had to pivot. I think it's Charles Darwin that says it's not the smartest, it's not the most beautiful, it's not the strongest that survive. It's the most willing. It's the most willing, able to adapt to their
Yeah.
circumstances. I think as species, and so we had to adapt. We had to pivot, and so we pivoted to. We've got sort of two channels that we focus on now. As I was telling you earlier, we look at infill Sydney Metro at land subs, and we look at higher owner occupier luxury residential lower scale type product.
Give us examples of the two
Yeah.
kind of projects that you're working on at the moment and the style for
Yeah,
our
perfect.
viewers to see.
So the higher end luxury residential, we're doing a project now in Renwick. They're terraces, private lifts, private parking, all the the natural stones, the timbers,
Price
and
point?
price point you're talking 4 mil
Yep.
plus. And then the other side of that is the is the infill residential space, where we're pretty much buying land at bulk, chopping it down, and then just selling it at a price point. So that's stuff like we're doing an infill subdivision now in Greystanes, 8,000 square meters, subdivided into 14 450 square meter lots. We've partnered up with a home builder and then packaged the lands to sell at a price point. Nothing
Sure.
too serious, nothing mums and dads, upsizes, potentially even downsizes, just looking for a place to call home, and more price sort of price driven rather than lifestyle driven. So I think on the higher end, there's a huge market now of downsizes, a huge market of upsizes. There's a lot of money in that higher end that are looking for lifestyle.
Yeah.
They want it, they'll pay for lifestyle because they've realized that they've worked their whole life. They deserve a bit of
Sure.
piece of comfort. So they're in the absolute, best locations that the shopping centers, the light rail, the hospitals, the university, you don't need a car. You literally don't need a car. It's walking distance to everything, and you've got the luxuries of getting 10,000 steps in, and walkability is a key driver.
So you guys were basically in the construction space, delivering
Yeah,
high volume kind of product. You've moved away to higher value,
correct.
away from volume, and developing other niches like land. What do we need from your perspective to address that high volume construction? Because we need houses in this
Yeah,
country. We
yeah,
need dwellings. When people like you and entrepreneurs like yourself are moving away from that and
yeah,
they're in that space, what's going to get you back in?
yeah. It's a great question. Fundamentally, developers are a business,
Yeah.
right? And they're gonna put their cost of acquisition, their cost of delivering, and there's got to be a return there at the end. what I think is going to happen to bring developers back into the marketplace, it's really a short term and a long term thing. In the longer term, end values are going to adjust,
Sure.
right? And that's the market naturally doing its thing. In the short term, there's a number of measures, and the biggest measure is going to be what they're doing right now, releasing land, not in areas where there is already 10,000 apartments approved, but more in areas that have been so tightly held.
Okay.
We're talking those inner ring suburbs where blue chip, where it's been incredibly difficult to get a pergola approved.
Yeah.
Releasing land in those areas is going to result in a bigger influx of development, because the feasibilities in those areas are that you're able to offer the landowner, maybe 50 to 70% more than what their house is worth as a residential home.
But it's still not affordable, right? It's still gonna be a middle to sub premium product.
Correct. But at the same time as well, is that it really depends on what you're like. If you're developing, say, in an inner ring suburb, your buyers are going to come from that inner ring suburb.
Yeah.
So they're going to be selling something to be buying this. So for them, it's going to be more about clearing getting the downsizer who's got the large home on
Freeing
800
up
square meters,
supply.
freeing up supply,
Yeah.
bringing that additional supply into the market. Now, if your question is how we're going to deliver affordable housing,
Yeah.
that's a whole different
Mm.
beast, right? And that's a very, very big beast.
Because Roseville apartments
No,
are
I'm not
not gonna
going to.
be 500
18
grand.
grand, 18 to 20 grand a meter
Yeah.
and sale price is not affordable.
So they're $2 million
But
too.
built to rent as well is not affordable.
Yeah.
Because you're paying for lifestyle, but you're at the expense of your longer term financial planning. So how are we going to deliver more affordable
Yeah.
product?
Let's hit that.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And it's obviously it's a challenge that's being solved by people a lot smarter than us. But I think from what we've been seeing, the state government and the federal government investing more in modular homes.
Mhm.
So if we can build a product in a factory that doesn't have weather delays, that is more automated, that it can be more certain, that can potentially cut the price of construction by 20-30%, right? And the other thing as well is the state government and federal government being one of the largest owners of land,
Yeah.
partnering up and pretty much providing the land for free,
Mm.
and almost like you just deliver this product and we'll be your joint venture partner on this, and over time we'll get our reward, but in the short term we just need to deliver product. So that's been one of the other ways where we're seeing unprecedented amount of government homes and land being put up for sale and being tendered for joint venture partnerships and whatnot. So I think that's really where we're trying to deal with this more affordable and the other way is this changing shift in sentiment, where we're seeing rent investors come in where they're like, I love Sydney, I want to stay there because of work, family, for whatever reason, but I don't need to buy in Sydney.
Mhm.
So why should I go and buy a $1 million apartment in the inner west somewhere? I can just spend that $1 million and go buy an actual house in an inner ring suburb in Brisbane.
Yep.
And I can just live here and rent, my wife and I, or my family and I can have at least land that's going to appreciate over
Sure.
time. So this sentiment of the great Australian dream of having your own home, living in your home, and we're starting to see that sort of change and closer to what we see in Europe, where it is customary to rent for 30 years, 40
Yeah.
years, but in lifestyle hubs, right? And so this whole idea of home ownership is slowly, I'm seeing it particularly in my generation,
Yeah.
this trend of what like it's too hard, we're 15, the average home median house price to income is like 12 or 13 or 14 times the average wage, where 10 years ago I think it was like 8 or 9, and then 10 years before that it was like 4 or 5. So that's been another shift that we've been seeing, where it's like it's too in the too hard basket, so the market will vote, will dictate otherwise.
Steve, last question.
Yeah, go for it.
It's my favorite question. What have you learnt about yourself as an investor? And I think perhaps for you even more as a leader working in the property development space, what have you learned over the past few years?
Yeah, appreciate that. what I've learned is that we can go a lot harder than we first think. And when we set out to do something, we get into it and we realize that it's a lot harder than it is. But because
Mhm.
you're in the middle of the hole, you can't go back. And it's almost what you learn is uh, challenging yourself and pushing yourself. You're gonna uncover this innate ability to do so much more than you would have thought. And I think Einstein says to keep your balance. You got to keep on moving. And so I think we underestimate what we can do in the long term and overestimate what we can do in the short term. So just doing the fundamentals day to day, showing up over time, over time, over time. Nothing can break down a strong foundation. So
Very well said. Thank you
uh,
very much. Thanks for sharing your insights. It's really, really great to get perspective from people like yourself. And thank you for sharing that with us. And we wish you all the best.
no problem, Peter, and hope the audience enjoyed it.
Thank you.